Hello and welcome back to OT, the podcast. Here to talk about watches, time and how to spend it. I am Andy Green.
I'm Felix Scholz. Andy Green.
What's been happening?
I mean, aside from the usual mess of deadlines, upcoming events, and existential crises, not too much. Bit of gossip.
Lot of goss, lot of watch world drama over the last couple of weeks since we had Mr. Enthusiast on the pod. It just seems like there's been a tornado of goss and drama.
Do you think the two are related?
Could be Big Watch trying to crush the success of the B01, the Toledano Chan. Could be.
I mean, AP, they returned the one watch they bought, allegedly, and, now they've got the knives out.
Yeah, got a quick scan of it. No, but a few things. I mean, the first one was a big departure from Hodinkee by the way of Danny Milton, who has joined Teddy.
He's gone to Teddy.
Teddy, well, I guess.
Who's Teddy?
Teddy Baldassarre.
I said Teddy Baldassarre.
Teddy Baldassarre?
I don't know. This is one of those, I don't think I've ever heard it said.
Has anyone ever said it out loud?
Are you quickly Googling how to say Teddy Baldassarre? Baldassarre.
Teddy Baldassarre, but he's American.
Yes. You never know. Hey, so Teddy, let's just go with Teddy. Let's stick with Teddy.
Teddy's the watch business. So I say Teddy because Teddy's the actual watch boutique. But obviously it's a website. It's a very big YouTube channel. Over 1 million subscribers, I think, on YouTube. So it's one of the biggest out there as far as watch goes.
Sure.
Great guy, Teddy. Met him in Geneva earlier this year. Danny also, sat next to him on the bus. We had a great chat.
Oh, nice.
He had heard of OT, actually. He was
shit.
oh, yeah, I know you guys. I was like...
His YouTube just started auto-playing which is...
don't want that.
No.
Lovely photos as well. He's always posted amazing photos, but he really made a big splash. I think it was at the start of this year, I want to say, opening a bricks and mortar boutique, which is always cool to see someone expand into outside the realm of, online into
in this
physical.
Economy too. Bold.
I have a feeling that Mr. Wonderful was involved. Kevin O'Leary.
I've seen a bit of Mr. Wonderful on Teddy.
Yeah, they've become pals, which is also quite cool. And maybe he backed him. I don't know. At least emotionally gave him that support.
Clout as well.
Kept it real. A lot of red straps. But, Danny Milton has left Hodinkee and is now the Vice President of Content for Teddy Baldassarre.
We'll have to get Teddy on to correctly pronounce his name one day.
Just one question from Teddy, and that's how do you do it?
How do we say your
Bit of a loss for Hodinkee, I'd say.
He was he like the editor or like head of content? He was like one of the main editorial pillars along with James Stacey, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, just one of the head ofs, one of the main pillars in every sense of the word, and a jack of all trades. Takes a nice photo, reviews a nice watch, does a nice review. Yep. I would have said a really dependable editor as well, like not too niche, broad appeal, loved by the community. So it's definitely, it's another blow to the big H.
Yeah, the big Hodinkee's not had a great run of it in 2024.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad to see. Sad to see that when the community that you effectively, had a massive part in building turns on you a little bit.
What do you think? I mean, I don't know if we want to necessarily go too deep onto this, but if you were employed by McKinsey as a consultant, which we know is well within your skill set, to come in and provide some strategic advice to Hodinkee and the LVMH investment group that owns a piece of Hodinkee, what would your advice be to turn that ship around?
I'd go, which I think they've been doing, but I think I'd go back to the basics. I'd go back to the core of what made them, special and what they built the business off. Obviously, you can have the commerce side of things, but I'd try and go back to the core in some way, not entirely, because you can't, just cater to diehard watch enthusiasts or the people leaving the negative comments. You have to remember that they far underrepresent, the overall comments, and the positive ones rarely come through. But I would probably go back to basics and really just focus on the types of content and the approach that got them to where they got to.
Certainly from a editorial and perception point of view, I think, sort of keep it core. But is that letting the Haiti nerds win? Like,
well, they're already winning to an extent, right? Because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. The negativity breeds negativity, and it sort of just becomes inescapable. So
get Ben to fire up a couple of reference points, a couple of videos, get John Mayer back again, tone back on some of the limited editions, which is hard because that's also your revenue.
Yeah. Oh, don't make too much money from ads, so go do your own.
Well, limited
editions. I know you're doing too many.
They have to balance the sales side with, making the content, making the public side of it look like it's turning around. I don't know. That's an unenviable task.
Speaking of bad optics, Bremont's run continues to be one of interest. Sure. Chris Hallgate did a good rundown. If you're not subscribed to Chris Hall's newsletter, you should be, because he's great.
In show notes.
And I think it's his main thing at the moment. So go support a great guy with great content. He did some coverage on Bremont. The couple of things been happening with Bremont lately. The quiet erasure of a pretty high profile ambassador with the Netflix special.
Let's just say Bremont. He left Bremont. Bremont went to Montblanc. So there's a little bit of. This is not just on Bremont, but he was very associated with Bremont.
He was very associated, and then and this is probably maybe this is indicative of the personality to kind of be supported by a brand like Bremont for so long, and then so quickly jump ship to Montblanc. But the drama hasn't stopped there. They also did a limited edition with another British company, but it used the old logo, and then people were sort of going, "Why have you used the old logo on this new release watch? Didn't you just do this whole thing?" Which was all this, controversy around it. And I saw the replies from Bremont. They were basically saying that they use the old logo for special editions, and they use the new logo on new watches and only on certain lines. So it's like they're using a different logo depending on what it is. And it seemed like an afterthought, which is not what you want when you rebrand a business.
There was a much easier answer. Like, the watch was in production and had been signed off by everyone before we, announced this update. So it was in the pipeline. We're not going to, pass the cost on to the consumer. We're redesigning the dial, la.
But they're doubling down on it. They're just pushing through. It's quite fascinating. I think they think this is they'll get through the initial controversy. And that's the vibe I get from the supporters, is that they're very much towing the line of like, this is going to turn around. We're going to get through it. The dust will settle. People will forget about it, and then we'll be a new thing.
Because
you think?
I don't know if you are old enough to, in watches at least, to remember this. People hated with a passion the Omega coaxial chronometer.
That's true.
Escapement, sorry. They hated it. Like, it was like, oh, this is, because it put prices up and it was new and it was perceived as like a essentially meaningless thing, which, kind of is.
Yeah, they don't have Omega money though. They don't have that Swatch. That Swatch bank.
True. Yeah.
Where you can ride through anything if you have the resources to. I just don't know that they do. The other drama, Felix.
Hang on. I want to sit on this because I went to the effort of pulling up the new Bremont, which really looks quite nice actually.
Does actually, yeah.
Which is the sad irony. It's a triple collab.
Yeah.
Bremont X Brompton X Cheney. I know who, maybe two of those, I think Brompton make bikes.
Yeah.
I don't know what Cheney does.
This was the other thing that you've just reminded me of. These are like they really built the language around this collaboration as like supporting UK industry and making things in the UK. And great collab last year when that's what you were trying to do. Now that you're not, why are you part of this?
Okay. Sorry, I cut off your beef. You had some beef going on with...
I have no beef.
Unresolved beef. You got a lot of beef.
What is it, 51st Street? 54th Street? One of the 50ths.
The Diamond District?
The Diamond District. Stuff's going down. I thought it was you thought prices are going down, but there's a bit of watch beef amongst the dealers. I don't know if it's artificial or manufactured to get some views and to get some clout, but it also seems one way, I have to say. But it's this guy Manny who he just went off on this rant, and it was obviously directed at John Buckley and Vukum, with the way that they sort of do their fast flips and they do these videos. And he just said that they're all made up, they're pre-agreed, they're not real transactions, they don't happen. And he just, but in, a very New York jeweler sort of way, and just went off.
He was pretty angry.
He was very angry about it. And then so, Buckley's one of the biggest people on watch TikTok, at least, as is Vukum, and they've got the group chat and all that sort of stuff. And so people were sort of defending Buckley, but then a lot of people were like, nah, actually, right, I think these are made up transactions. Like, they just seems to be real. The guy buys a watch and then he walks down the street and makes $2,000. That just can't be real. And so a lot of people, it's pretty split. The comments are pretty split.
Do you think that TikTok's comment section was having a reasonable conversation about media literacy in 2024? Because OFC, if there's more than one grainy iPhone involved, some thought and preparation has gone into it. If someone's wearing a mic,
the mics are there. You notice that there is like 3 or 4 cameras now. There's a lot of, you see the same transaction, a lot of angles.
The edits, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure there's hey, I've got a watch, I'm going to come over and try and sell you around. I'm sure there's a bit of that. I mean, I don't really have a comment on what's real and what's not, but I do find it funny that, I mean, what happens next is another watch industry boxing match, which we've not seen since Nico versus Trax.
I think the one thing that your mate, whose name I cannot recall, Manny,
yeah.
Your side of the beef, obviously. The one thing I do recall was I think there's probably some weight to this, where he was saying like the subscribing for the group on how to get stuff is, look, if you're paying for like private sales access, sure, I think there's probably merit in that. If you're subscribing to something like to learn how to become a better watch trader, that feels a little Andrew Tate Academy.
It's it's interesting. It's interesting. We'll stay out of it. But what we won't stay out of, Felix, which is something we've not even mentioned.
What?
We have a guest this week.
Oh my God, we've got a guest. His name's probably in the headline.
It's probably in the headline. John Warren from Cornell Watch Company, calling in from Chicago. By day, he's a lawyer. By night.
Do you reckon he knows Tony Trainer? Another Chicago-based lawyer / watch guy?
He's got to.
Or is there beef?
No. Hodinkee did a really lovely write-up on their debut watch. But I met John and his lovely, lovely wife in the same night I met Tony Trainer. So maybe...
Also the same trip you met Teddy Baldassarre?
Yeah. I mean, Geneva paid off. And I thought it was lovely. He sold me on the vision, sold me on the dream.
Yep.
I've had it earmarked to have a proper chat with him. And so that's exactly what we're going to do right now.
We did have a proper chat. Let's get into it, Andy.
Felix, joining us today is John Warren from Cornell Watch Company. I had the pleasure of bumping into John in Geneva, of all places, earlier this year, around the time of Watches and Wonders, and we got chatting. He caught my attention with the watches on his and his partner's wrist, and I figured it was time to get him on for a chat, especially given the recent heat around Cornell Watch Company. Welcome to OT, John.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here. Good to see you too, Felix. Thanks for having me on.
No, absolute pleasure. We had a great chat. Well, from what I remember anyway, I remember it as a great chat about the sort of the work you were doing. That was 7 or 8 weeks ago now, a couple of months ago anyway. And it was sort of a really exciting time for you. But I think we should wind back, if you appreciate the pun, wind back to really what Cornell Watch Company is, because it's an old name but a new brand. Why don't we start with what it is and what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Cornell Watch Company, like many old American pocket watch brands, they existed during the late 1800s. They made a specific type of watch. They made a railroad watch. And they based their designs based on industry standards, and then also with an emphasis on doing everything in-house and focusing on traditional crafts that we're trying to pick up now, like enameling, hand finishing. And so the Cornell Watch Company started in 1870 in Chicago. It was founded by Paul Cornell and also J.C. Adams. And the significance of that is J.C. Adams would go on to found 6 other American brands, including the Elgin Watch Company, which at the time was the biggest in the world. So they had a lot of firepower in terms of the technical know-how to make a great watch company. And even the co-founder of IWC found their way to the Cornell Watch Company and helped run it with Paul Cornell about halfway through its life. So there were a lot of really interesting people involved, and the watch was designed and created, the original pocket watches, that is, to help people on the rail lines, because Paul Cornell brought the rail lines to a city he founded, or rather part of a city, Hyde Park in Chicago. So he brought the rail lines to Hyde Park, which he founded, and he knew that there was an opportunity to also introduce railroad pocket watches to the people that worked on the train lines where his new town was. And so, as luck would have it, I went to college right down the street from the original factory, and I actually lived on Cornell Avenue. And so that opened like this door to the world of watchmaking in Chicago for me, and of course the Cornell Watch Company. And so that's where it started. And today, like I now collect. I'm sitting next to 24 Cornells. Today I collect the Cornell pocket watches, and I have for the last 10 years. And so the genesis of this was trying to create a modern interpretation for friends and family initially, that took all of the aspects that we love about the original pocket watch that made it great, and bring that forward, while keeping it as much American made as we could. So that's where we find ourselves today.
That's quite a it's quite a jump, like from real, maybe having an interest in watches or pocket watches, working out there's sort of a local connection, to deciding to, restart this brand, 100 years after it was, kicking around. What took you to make that leap? Like, most people would be happy just, having some pocket watches.
Yeah, it was definitely a leap. It wasn't a leap at the beginning, because at the beginning it was, again, really just a project for friends and family. And so for a while, we had kicked around the idea, like, how interesting would it be if we could create a modern interpretation of these pocket watches? And there really wasn't like a mechanism to do it, or at least do it well. There's a lot of white labeling options in the United States that work with, say, Switzerland or Asia. That's not something that really interests us in doing, in part because a lot of the traditional techniques that the original Cornell Watch Company used, we could not replicate through like simply a white label model. And so for a while we had kind of fantasized about, well, maybe we could recreate the wristwatch, but we didn't really know how to do it. And that's when we started working with Roland Murphy 3 years ago. That's when it really kicked off. Roland was able to see the vision. He was already making similar watches. And when I say similar, I mean that he was making Grand Fou enamel dial watches. He was doing hand finishing, hand assembling. He was making cases. And so this was something that was totally within his wheelhouse to do, and do it really well. And so it wasn't until we talked to him that it really was like, this is even possible. And that was step one. And step two was, okay, we're doing this for friends and family. Now let's think about actually doing this as a business. And that's where all the real work started to really kick off.
You mentioned Roland Murphy there, and he's a kind of like the big name in American watchmaking. Can you explain maybe why he's significant in that sort of landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. So Roland used to work at Hamilton. He's really modest in interviews, but he was responsible for a lot of the modern designs that you see at Hamilton. And he's been at RGM, his own company, for the last 30 years. And in that time, what started as he was doing guilloche and these traditional techniques and case making has turned into, he's doing his own movements now, like the 801. He's doing the first serial produced tourbillon in the United States that's made in Lancaster, PA. He's got dozens of watches. He has a robust custom program. He services a bunch of really well-known Swiss brands. And he's also a huge collector, like one of the craziest collectors I've ever seen. And he employs a whole team in Lancaster, so he's creating jobs. A lot of these people have been on with him for 10, 15, 20 years. So he's doing incredible work in the United States. He's one of only a handful of watchmakers in the U.S. that are actually making watches. Himself, and then Josh Shapiro, obviously, Keaton Myrick. I mean, these guys are doing they're doing stuff that you just don't see anymore. So I think Roland was a natural. He's a dream partner to have for us. And in the absence of Roland, the project would have never become what it has. In part because we could not. The value of the watch is based on the traditional techniques we're using, the quality, and without Roland, frankly, that wouldn't be possible.
Amazing. I want to hear how you actually got, I guess, the rights to the brand. Like, how do you go about resurrecting it? Yeah,
so this is actually interesting because there are dozens of American brands that are dead and people don't know about. During the late 1800s, early 1900s, I would equate the pocket watch industry in the U.S. sort of like the dot-com bubble, in that pocket watches were a brand new technology, at least in the sense that they were available to the masses. American firms did a fantastic job lowering the price of really precise, high quality timepieces. So for the first time, they were getting in the hands of the masses, and they were also being used for professional industry like the railroads. And so the Cornell Watch Company was one of many that popped up at the time to basically take advantage of this new booming industry. So I say that just because for other people thinking about my hometown had XYZ pocket watch company, this could be interesting. It's likely that the rights to that pocket watch company are in the public domain. There's not a ton of interest in America to revive these companies yet. Hopefully the Cornell Watch Company can help change that. But for us, the Cornell Watch Company was in the public domain. No one had owned it since it had sold its rights to the California Watch Company in 1876. And so one thing we did early on was hire an attorney to help us get the trademark. And so now we own the rights, the full rights, and the trademark to the Cornell Watch Company, which was a big milestone for us because, that's like a very lengthy process. And without it, it's hard to function as a brand. But if there's other pocket watch companies in the U.S. that other people are interested in, the process is not too difficult. It's just a matter of doing the research, and many of them are still in the public domain.
Don't say that. I'm surprised you haven't gone and taken them all up.
No, well, we gotta see if Cornell works first.
One's enough to start with.
That could be interesting. And I think some of the stuff we're working on with Cornell is we're trying to do our part to help revive American watchmaking. One of those things is we're putting together a directory of component manufacturers and suppliers in the U.S. And so hopefully when we get that fully aggregated and share it with the public, then maybe other people will step up to the plate and say, hey, I now have the resources to be able to maybe revive a pocket watch company that was in my hometown. So we'll see. So
I just want to have a follow-up to that. So the brand was in the public domain, defunct, obviously not operating, but in the US at least, because I know your background is law, what's the criteria to sort of effectively take a defunct watch brand and claim it as your own?
Yeah, well, it's got to be. So we hired a law firm for this. I don't practice this kind of law, but I know enough to know that you have to hire good people to handle these things. So the process is relatively straightforward, and it sort of coincides directly with just trademark law. And that being, is it available in the public domain? If it's not, then you probably have to go buy it from someone. But if it's available, then it's just a matter of trademark law. So our customer is going to be confused with your watch company versus another existing brand. If not, then it should be okay. One thing that we struggled with, and I don't want to say struggled, but wanted to make sure was right, was that when you look at our name, the Cornell Watch Company, it's a pretty standard name, right? So how do we differentiate it from other brands that might be associated with us? And to do that, that's where you see the addition of our logo, the fleur-de-lis, which was an embellishment on the original pocket watch movements. We also added Chicago, So to make it so customers, there'd be no confusion of
Yeah.
our marks versus someone else. But it comes down to, it's basically just standard trademark law. I think where you'd run into issues is if you're reviving a big brand, let's say Elgin, Waltham, or something like that, then it's likely that someone probably owns the rights to like the bigger, more well-known brands.
And I imagine on that sort of thing, there's stipulations around, like, I imagine if you called it CWC, that would have some issues and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah. So we don't even say CWC in internal emails.
Yeah.
Just because we don't want to get in that habit, right?
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, and as a small brand, like a lot of what we think about is risk control, right? So risk control, that's an example of like, we need to make sure that we're covering our bases on that. It also can relate to the watch, right? Like all of our watches are warranted by the RGM Watch Company. That's again a risk control.
Yeah.
That's if the Cornell Watch Company ceases to exist in 5 years because, you know, it's not financially viable, or I get hit by a bus or whatever the case may be. Like, we need our customers to know that your watch is safe. It will be serviced with the RGM Watch Company. You'll have great support. And I think, as it's just a general commentary, I think like that specific example is a problem that I've had with micro brands in the past, where beautiful design, great team, great story, whatever the case may be, even really robustly well built. But what do I do in 3 years, right? Like what happens when I need it serviced? What happens if it breaks? You know, and those are things that actually slow me down from exploring new brands. And so it's a long-winded way of saying, like, the trademark, like our warranties, there's a lot of like risk control that goes into it.
The less sexy parts of starting a new watch company, for sure, but probably real important.
I mean, most of what we do is not sexy, right? Like, we design. So the design process we prototyped for over 2 years. In those 2 years, a lot of what we were doing wasn't like, here's a mock-up of what we want it to look like. A lot was, how can we achieve this given technical constraints? And what I mean by that is, so Roland is a 30-year watchmaker, longer than that. He's owned RGM for 30 years. Every aspect of the watch isn't just created because of how it looked or aesthetically, but rather how would it work technically, right?
Yeah.
So the thickness of our watch, the box sapphire we use, the hand types, all of that were design decisions, but they were also, how can this technically work? So it's a long-winded way of saying, like, all of these processes take a lot of time. The risk controls that go into all of it kind of funnel through the whole process. And so as a startup brand, like, those are the non-sexy things where we can't just turn it on and say, we want, a watch to be like this, and we want to have it in 6 months and have it ready to go. We have to prototype and test everything. So I love the design process, but it's not just a turn the switch on, because it has to work technically. And it more than just work technically, it has to meet RGM standards, which are really high.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You're making, I mean, you just did your first raffle of 10 watches, and you're sort of talking 1 or 2 dozen watches per year at the moment. So you do have to fit in with RGM's capacity, but also their appetite to work with you, by the sounds of things, because it sounds like they've invested quite a lot of time and given you quite a bit of faith. I mean, even if I think about the commerciality of them, selling you 10 movements versus like the reward of that.
Right.
How did you get Roland on board? Like, he must have really bought the vision.
He bought the vision, and Roland also knew that he could make a watch like that really well. So like I mentioned, RGM makes a lot of enamel dial watches with hand finishing, hand assembled, hand regulated. Their team's familiar with how to do it and how to do it well. They have a really robust custom program. And while we didn't funnel directly through the custom program, we were something separate. I think it's important to note that Roland is very comfortable doing things that are new and bespoke. And so, like, our case is completely new. The movement is completely new to RGM. The sizing is new. So Roland was like very comfortable doing it. But you bring up a great point. And this is like a huge barrier to entry for starting a watch brand. There's minimum quantity orders. right? So if you white label something and you just have it drop shipped from Switzerland or whatever, you can't just say, I want 10 watches. I mean, they won't even do it. They won't take your call, right? I think minimums were like 200, 300, whatever the case may be. It might be a dollar amount. But Roland, it was more of a partnership from the very beginning where we both really appreciate the pocket watches. He's a huge collector. I'm a huge collector. There was this sense of like, we think we can do something that's really interesting that resonates with people. RGM is not a revival. RGM is the Roland G. Murphy Company. And so this is a little bit different. And we've got a catalog of Cornell designs that really resonated with RGM, and it resonates with us. And so we feel very fortunate that Roland agreed to work with us. And the other part too is Roland had the vision to say, okay, you guys have something special here, keep pushing. Because I mean, we initially made 5 that were for friends and family, and they're denoted with prototype on the back. They're fully working, but they're prototypes. I mean, we made 5. And the next stage of like, okay, we're going to make 10 and we're going to fully fund 10, or we're not going to take deposits, but we're going to fully fund them because we're a brand new brand. And like, I frankly didn't feel comfortable getting deposits from people when we've never sold a watch. So that jump, a lot had to do with Roland being like, you've got a good thing here. I'm getting good feedback. You guys should listen to the feedback you're getting and take a chance. So now we're here. But it moved slow and it was like kind of organic, and it took 3 years to get to where we are now. The next stage in terms of ramping up production, we've got a few things that we're exploring. RGM has a decent amount of capacity to help us, 25 to 50 pieces we can definitely do. If we go beyond that number, then we have to start thinking creatively about how to do it. The path of least resistance, at least how I've talked to Roland about, is we may bring on, another watchmaker at RGM to help build our watches. Wow. So that's something we're talking about and exploring if demand gets there, and it makes sense for us as a company. But as you know, like the watchmaking business, this is a very capital intensive business. And my wife and I, we run and fund the whole thing. And so what we're really focused on is like doing what we're doing right now really well. We don't have a marketing budget. We don't have a huge budget to travel, but we have budget for prototyping and making, a quality timepiece with RGM. And that's where like all of our energy is spent. And so we definitely don't want to stretch ourselves on like, okay, like let's try to make 200 right now and bring on extra headcount and all of this, and then really start worrying about margins. Like right now, it's like we're trying to do it just really well, and then kind of keep growing and trying to build momentum with the customers that we try to resonate the most with, and that's watch enthusiasts.
I think now's probably a great time to actually talk about your debut watch, the 1870 CE. Can you, we've talked about, the dial, some of the elements. Can you sort of give us an elevator pitch as to what it is and what it looks like? Yeah,
absolutely. So the 1870 CE takes inspiration from the original Cornell Watch Company railroad pocket watches from the 1870s. We use the same techniques as the original Cornell Watch Company used in their watches, and that being reel-fired enamel dials, reel-fired blued steel hands, hand finishing on the movements, hand assembly, hand regulating. But we then try to modernize it. Obviously, it's in a very wearable size at 39 millimeters. Thickness is around 10 millimeters. And we tried to bring forward some of the design elements from the pocket watch in a more modern and contemporary way. And what I mean by that is you'll see that our logo is a little bit more built out than the original Cornell Watch Company, right? The original Cornell Watch Company just said the Cornell Watch Company. One of the problems with that, it was relatively austere. We prototyped that exact version. Another thing that you'll notice that we updated, we went away from the spade hands and went to the leaf hands. The leaf hands end up being, it seems like a very minor thing, but we prototyped the spade hands, and the spade hands, frankly, did not work in a modern watch in the way that we wanted them to. So we went to the leaf hands. So there's little things like this that we changed. to make it a little bit more modern. And so our watch today is a modern interpretation of the original Cornell pocket watch. And as we look forward, we're going to maintain these same traditional techniques, but iterate on the design in a way that's like tasteful and makes sense for us as a company. So like looking forward, you'll see that we're going to introduce different enamel dial colors. You're going to see maybe precious metals being introduced, different hand material types, stuff like that. And then we've got some plans for prototyping additional models, new models outside of the 1870 that'll be coming around next year, and hopefully into production next year as well. But we're prototyping a bunch of different things right now.
Yeah, amazing. I've had the pleasure of sort of seeing a couple of, they must have been prototypes on your wrist. And one of the things I appreciated was the size. You know, as you sort of mentioned, 39 mil. And about 10 mil thick, so not super chunky. A lot of the time when these pocket watch brand or pocket watch inspired brands or even retrofitted stuff, they're 50 mil watches, and they're really pocket watches. One of the other things though I remember saying to you, which is the maybe the Australian in me, but I said I think they were around 10,000 US per watch, and I told you to double the price. Because I didn't think that was, going to be sustainable, or the next year they will be double anyway. Just because
we hope.
But it is a beautiful design. I can attest to it, and it is the enamel dial is stunning as well. So I'll definitely call that out. But you sort of, the thing that I left because we had a good chat. The thing I left our chat with was you had a really clear vision on you and your wife on what you wanted to achieve, reviving the American kind of watchmaking element was part of it, but you also wanted to kind of grow the presence of people, which you sort of mentioned in America, like the different suppliers. And you also, I think, talked about wanting to kind of give back to the industry and to, I think there was like a philanthropic angle as well that you talked about. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, so we work with HSNY, the Horological Society of New York, and so we donate to their watchmaking scholarships. And one of the reasons we're doing that is we spent a lot of time thinking about what are the key issues that are getting in the way of reviving American watchmaking. And we can have a whole conversation about why we think it matters that there's a return of American watchmaking and the legacy of American watchmaking. But today, what are the things that are getting in the way of getting us from where we are now, where it's like a disjointed supply chain, a shortage of watchmakers, approximately 4,000 watchmakers in the U.S. alone for a shortage. So what are the things we can do now where we can, as a very small company, have immediate impact? And one of those was giving to scholarships. So for the 1870 CE, for every watch we sell, we give $500 to HSNY. So for our first series, we were able to give them $5,000, which we're super thrilled about, especially for being a brand with such a small footprint, and we don't sell a lot of watches. And so that's also where, in a lot of the research we do was a result of, I've always loved collecting the Cornells. I also collect Waltons. I collect Elgins. I collect Rockfords, where a lot of the employees from the Cornell Watch Company ended up going to Rockford. So in their designs and their movement architecture, there's a lot of overlap. So I collect those too. But a lot of the history that we talk about isn't just from collecting. It's about how do we use the history to help inform where we're going to go next, right? What are the mistakes that American watch companies made? Or rather, not even mistakes, but what are the things that they did that led to their demise? What can we look at in the Swiss watchmaking industry and the German and the Japanese that have allowed them to succeed and thrive, right? So and I mention that because the history helps inform our initiatives. And right now, there's a huge human capital problem in the U.S. Even with, and we've talked to component manufacturers and watchmakers in the U.S., even if we had unlimited money to fund the machines, the factories, whatever the case may be, you still need talent. And the talent that we have, it does exist here. we've met a ton of phenomenal watchmakers and a lot of watchmaking students that are going through the system now. But there's not enough. And a lot of them are overworked and they work at service centers. And that's where they're being trained. And so it's like, what can we do to help support that pipeline of students and professionals? Because without that, even with unlimited money in the machines and full factories, it doesn't really matter. And that's where like Switzerland really succeeds. You know, they have a cottage industry. They've had it for hundreds of years. And they have this huge pipeline and repository of talent. Yeah. So that's kind of why that's where the scholarship, the genesis of it came from. I mean, and we love that we're able to make an impact with so few watches.
Yeah. I mean, that's just 500 per, that's what, nearly 5% of revenue, which is a pretty significant piece to slice out.
So the Waltham Watch Company in the 1880s, their marketing budget per watch was around 6%. Mm-hmm. We don't have a marketing budget at all. It's zero. So
we won't send you an ad. We won't send you a pitch deck then for sponsorship.
Yeah, no, we don't.
This one's on us.
No. We can talk about that, but I mentioned that because again, through our research and studies of like, I'm not coming from a watch brand. Like I haven't worked in the industry. So like, what's the right number, you know? So, I mean, this is now getting into like the business side of this without having the constraints of a marketing budget. Then you can say, okay, what can we do with this? And we allocate it towards the scholarships. And so it kind of nets out to be about the same. Yeah. And we intend to continue to do that. Like that's for every 1870 CE, that's what we're going to do. And it's allowed us to also, like, we've met some incredible people. We were at the HSNY gala this year. Roger Smith spoke. We met a lot of watchmaking students, and like, there's so much excitement around it. And there's so much excitement around this revival of American watchmaking. It's not just us talking about it. Josh Shapiro's been talking about it. The guys at Vortic, where you mentioned, you know, like you can buy like pocket watches that have been revived and put into cases that are like a little bit bigger. The guys at Vortic do a fantastic job doing this. Like that's a really cool concept. You get like some of their pieces with like the damascening on some of the old Hamiltons are like incredible. Like they've got a really good offering, but they also started their own watch brand, the Colorado Watch Company, where they're making cases and making dials, and they're getting their movements from in the US. So it's not just us doing this. There's a lot of people doing it. And we've been able to kind of plug into that community and be a voice for it, right? Because like working with RGM, we have a really premium product. And as a result, like watch media, for example, like we're able to get in front of people that have a voice. Yeah. So for us, we've only sold 10 watches so far. And we've been in front of a lot of people that have a voice and can get our message out. And so then it's like, okay, so what are we going to do with it, right? And that's where we talk about our initiatives a ton, like more than the watch.
I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And that's, you know, it is true. You're maybe another Australianism. You're punching above your weight, you know,
right. Exactly.
You know,
yeah. People will listen. You know, we'll tell the story. And again, I think it resonates with people too in the U.S. in particular. We've got a bunch of interest from international clients in our raffle that we did. We had some international clients that won. But like for U.S. customers, a lot of these people were like, these towns that you're talking about where they were cradles of watchmaking, Boston, Lancaster, Chicago, even San Francisco. They're like, I grew up in these towns. Like, you know, my dad used to have an old pocket watch that he carried around and he gave it to me when I was 13 or whatever the case may be. Like people relate directly with these brands. And the US made more watches than anywhere in the world for nearly 100 years. And like, this was a major industry for us. And these pocket watches, especially these American made pocket watches, are everywhere. Like you go to antique shops, you're guaranteed to see an American-made pocket watch. We talk to so many people that say like, oh yeah, I've got a couple old pocket watches in my drawer, or I got them in an estate sale or whatever. Like it's interwoven into the fabric of American industry.
Yeah.
Except a lot of people don't know the backstory of it. And so there's a ton of interest from American customers about not just the history, but like, oh, what can we do to bring it back once they learn about, what American watchmaking was.
Yeah, and I think another thing that you sort of, when you're talking about, that fostering American talent, the other part of it is that I suspect is both a blessing and a curse, is that once they get to a point of skill or, capability, they go live in Switzerland. And
that's probably the natural progression. Roland studied in Switzerland for a period of time. I think that would still be fantastic.
And then maybe they come back again,
Exactly. And then maybe they revive, an American pocket watch brand, or they start their own brand like Roland did. I think that's fantastic and part of the progression. There's several watchmaking schools here in the U.S. Rolex just opened one in Texas. But the catch here is that a lot of these are geared towards service centers. So watchmakers go through it, and the expectation is they work in a service center, which makes sense as a first step. But I think a lot of watchmakers have interest in creating their own brand or, working for an American brand. So yeah, I would imagine, though, many will apprentice or go to Switzerland. That's where the most talent is. That's where the most revolutionary stuff is happening. So that makes sense to me.
And speaking of going to Switzerland, that's where you caught up with Andy. That's
right.
Around a trade show. What was that like? Was that your first time, either as someone that enjoys watches or someone that's in the business, going to that sort of, business hub? Yeah.
So I've been to multiple trade shows here in the U.S. That are much smaller. Worn and Wound, for example, I think they do some of the best job with their watch fairs here, with the wind-up watch fairs. I say that because I now have a comparison to Watches and Wonders. But like Worn and Wound, so Watches and Wonders to me was very much so old world trade show. What I mean by that is, like, when you go to the show, it's not necessarily a ton of fun. It's more about the presentation and these crazy displays and all the money and grandeur of these brands. It's not so much about a collection of enthusiasts getting together like a watch meetup that you'd have at a local bar. Whereas the wind-up watch fair, everyone there you can walk up to anyone. They would love to talk. They've got an open bar and they're playing music, and it's a good time, and you can buy timepieces. You can talk to the watchmakers, the owners, and they're a lot of fun. It's like a party for enthusiasts. So it's like here we have Red Bar, which is like, and I think you guys do too. It's like a big Red Bar meetup. And they're a ton of fun. The Watches and Wonders thing, at least for us, showed us that we're playing in a sandbox. We're not playing in that sandbox. Like the Swiss and the French, that whole industry is so ingrained in the history of that region and the history of those brands that have been around for hundreds of years. They're doing something that is quite different than what we're doing here in the U.S. For better or for worse, whether that be through like extensive marketing budgets that you see on display at Watches and Wonders, whether you see through their supplier connectivity. I mean, these brands are all part of conglomerates too, right?
Yeah. So the richest families in the world own some of those brands.
So, I mean, they're not our competition. We're not really playing in the same league as them, right? So
Rolex isn't stressed by you.
No, I don't think no one in Swatch Group or Richemont or Rolex or anything. But it was telling in that for us to make a difference in American watchmaking, like there's a lot of things that we can be doing to get closer to what they have over there. And so that's I mean, Watches and Wonders too was like, I'm a watch lover. It's really cool seeing all the new releases.
It's a lot of buzz, isn't it?
There's tons of buzz. There's tons of excitement. We plan on going every year. But from a business perspective, it's very enlightening to illustrate. We're playing sort of a different game. We're trying to help revive American watchmaking. We're trying to relate to American customers. We're trying to just deliver a high quality product. We don't have a big marketing budget. We don't have any marketing budget.
You see how much money they make when you go to a watch fair and see, multi-million-dollar stands. But
it's crazy.
I want to ask you. You've got I saw an Instagram post last month. You have added an advisor to the Cornell Watch Company.
Yeah,
Kevin Warren. A lot of Warrens floating around the small business that is Cornell. So I'm not a sports ball fan, but it sounds like he's the president and CEO of the Chicago Bears, which is a baseball team.
Close. Yeah.
Basketball team.
Yeah, close. So he's my great uncle.
He's a great uncle.
Also, he's my great uncle. Yeah. He also a watch lover. He did a collaboration with Panerai a couple years back. So like he's like in it. He loves the design. He loves the concept, and also just the idea of reviving an American brand. And so that's like part of our initiative right now too, is like pulling in people that share our vision. And so we're trying to build out advisors for help in some ways to help not only scale, but like what should our next moves be? I people on our team, no one thinks that we're like totally clairvoyant and like we know what the best next move is. Frankly, like I've just been concerned about making a good watch with RGM and collecting pocket watches. And so getting this thing to the next phase while I'm doing everything right, it's like you kind of have to bring on people that know what they're doing. And I think that we've got a pretty good handle on what our customers like and expect from us. But getting to the next phase, that's hard. Like, how do we keep making more watches? How do we stay engaged with and access a new group of people? In our strange little world of watch enthusiasm, it's very different than like the general public, we found. Right. So, the watches that resonate with all of us aren't necessarily the hot sellers with like the general public. So it's like, how do we start working towards engaging that audience while telling our story without compromising on our current brand and neglecting our current customers and the current vision? And so that's where it's like we're trying to bring people on that can help us see that process through.
It sounds like you've drafted a good advisor. It might be a bit of hopefully it's a touchdown. Is that?
I think it is. I think it's
Here we go.
Someone's done some Googling.
I think it's good too, because like it's all, when we're doing these things, everyone that's on the team, like the one person we haven't talked about here is Garrison Jones, who's also a co-founder. He was my roommate in college. We lived on Cornell together. He's also a watch lover, but like he's family. And so everyone on the team is family effectively. And I think that's important because when you're working on this, I think it's very easy for it to feel more like work and less like fun. And when it starts to really feel like work, then you start, like, the passion for it kind of falls away. At least I think. And it feels like you have to do it. Like, none of us feel like that. We go to dinners together. We spend time together. We talk about the watch company initiatives, ideas that we have, and it's fun. And we want to keep it fun, right? And we want to keep doing things the right way. And so right now it's just like family. And to the extent we bring on other advisors, like, we hope they have the same vision where it's just about doing it right and not making it something that turns into work. Even though it like there's real dollars involved, but like it can still be fun and it can still be something you're passionate about.
John, I've got a challenge, a test. We started this interview, maybe slightly before we were recording. You're like, I've got no idea what's coming. You're going to sort of roast me, all that sort of stuff. We're not going to roast you, but I would like you, in 25 words or less, sum up everything Cornell Watch Company is about.
Okay.
You can think about it. You can give it a second.
I hope you don't have a word counter.
I got 10 fingers and I know how to count.
So the Cornell Watch Company is about honoring and celebrating American watchmaking, the history of the original Cornell Watch Company, and the traditional techniques used to create the pocket watches, while thinking about ways in which we can help support American watchmaking going forward. That's it.
That was a bit more than 25, but
failed.
Because you chose a brand with three letters in it, well, three words in it.
That was a problem.
Yeah, I gave you a few freebies there. Thank you very much for that. That's a nice summary.
Yeah, no, and it's been a ton of fun. Like we continue to have fun. I still collect the pocket watches. I just bought a new one recently. My wife is probably going to kill me at some point because like whenever they come on for sale, like I buy them, we restore them. I've got like a whole parts bin of old dials and individual components from the movements, and so like we're still having a ton of fun with it. And we have tons of fun with our customers. We've talked to every single one of our customers for the first series, and hearing their stories and why they came to Cornell, like that's really rewarding for us. And so,
yeah, that's great.
It's been great.
Plus, you got to start that museum somewhere.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, there are museums in the U.S. For pocket watches and American watch history, but we'd love to. Like, if we opened a boutique here, it would mainly be a shrine to like the original pocket watches, like we'd only have a few wristwatches, but it would just be like, it would be an insane collection of the old pocket watches. So maybe that's in the future.
I love it. Well, John, thank you for joining Felix and I. People can follow Cornell Watch Company on Instagram or head to the website, which is cornellwatchcompany.com. Like we were saying, they've missed out on the first raffle, but you've got a few more watches coming, and then hopefully next year a bigger allotment. Maybe by then Felix will buy me one. But really appreciate you taking the time, and yeah, good to catch up.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for the time.
Andy, let's move to Chicago and start a watch company. Apparently there's heaps going around. We could pick up another defunct name. I wonder if there's a Scholz watch company or Green. A Green watch that'd have some legs.
I think Scholz. I'm sure there is. Green and Scholz.
I reckon I'm going with Green Watch, and you can do some sort of medical dispensary watch collab where the watch is a NFT token that gets you in the door and acts as part of the subscription as service model for the dispensary. It's the future. We're gonna go big. Get Teddy Baldassarre to invest in us.
I'm sold. If you are a fan of OT the podcast, make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you're telling your friends and your family. Feel free to follow us on social media, ot.podcast.
Feel free to follow Andy on the street.
Follow me on the street. Join our Discord. You can chat with us and other like minds.
Still no Mr. Enthusiast in the Discord. It has been over 14 days and counting. He hasn't shown up yet.
Yet, being the key word. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.
Peace out.